It's Wrestling Observer Radio. I'm Garrett Gonzales alongside Dave Meltzer. Second Wrestling Observer Radio of the day. Tom and Brian did a show earlier today talking about the UFC show from tonight, also about Tom's upcoming fight, and other things. My plan with Tom is coming to fruition. We're splitting up the dynamic duo.
Oh, yeah.
Just kidding. So before we get into everything, I mean, tonight our show is going to be more like sort of a potpourri of stuff. That's a great Jeopardy category, potpourri. But just tons of stuff about, bouncing from topic to topic.
The state of the art.
Talking about, lots of stuff happening in wrestling and stuff. So, but before we get there, how was your birthday weekend?
It was fun. It was good. I spent, I'm like way behind on work, obviously, out last night and out tonight. But, yeah, I had a great time tonight. So, yeah.
Okay, so I guess the first thing I want to talk about.
I missed most of the UFC, although I did watch some of the main card tonight. I watched a lot of the baseball game too. So it's an exciting game. So
you're on top of it with the World Series.
I'm following the World Series. Yeah. So maybe over on let me think about this. So Game 5 is tomorrow.
I believe so.
Yeah, and that could be it.
Yep, the Red Sox, if they win one more game, it's over.
Yeah.
Then you would have the NBA Finals, 4-game sweep, and the World Series in 5.
Yeah.
So not the long series that the networks want.
No, not at all. And it'd also be kind of a good thing for WWE because if Game 6 goes against SmackDown, it'll hurt SmackDown real bad. But if not, SmackDown should pick up pretty good.
Have you followed any of the ratings for the games?
I haven't even looked. How's it doing?
I haven't looked too closely, but being that
last night's game went 18 innings, so I actually was kind of curious, and I know the overnights were out, but I've been so busy with other stuff I didn't even really look to see what the ratings did.
I mean, being that it's Boston and LA, I think people were expecting the ratings to be up, but I think they were actually down from last year, Game 1 to Game 1 at least. But I haven't looked at any other stuff.
Yeah, I mean, like an 18-inning game that ends at 3 a.m. Eastern is probably going to be down. But maybe not. Well, it'd have to be. Even when you look at, it's historical and it was exciting and everything like that. It went 18 innings and all that. But still, how many people are going to stay up till 3 a.m. on the East Coast? Yeah,
totally. Okay, so I guess the first thing to talk about is the WWE earnings stuff that came out. You wrote in the update, I think it was for Thursday or Friday?
It was Thursday was the update. I wrote a little bit about Friday as well, but yeah.
But house shows
were not good.
Money loser?
It depends on how you look at it. It's like EBITDA, they were up, was $120,000 in EBITDA over 3 months, which is horrible. But in operating income, it actually lost $1.1 million, which is even more horrible. And I mean, it's really a telling tale if, WWE, because before, they were running house shows and they always made money on house shows. I mean, the last time that I could ever recall WWE breaking even or losing money on house shows, you got to go back to the dark, the real dark ages, in that 90s period. And what's interesting about it is it's like the average attendance for domestic is 4,500, which is in what I would call the bad category, but not awful. I mean, there have been periods under 5 when it's under 5, especially because they're playing a lot of big arenas. When it's under 5, it's not good. But to me, under 4 would be awful. So it's not awful yet, but it's bad. But they're breaking even with it. Whereas before, they would average 3,800 and at lower ticket prices and make money. So the expenses are clearly way up, which is another aspect because they were drawing more. So I think when you're drawing more, you kind of budget more. But what's happened is the attendance has dropped and their budget stayed high, and now they're breaking even. And it was interesting because Vince's reaction was he knows what's wrong and he knows how to change it, so he's not worried about it. But he was, saying that he considers house shows the barometer, and house shows are a barometer for sure, because it's telling you how over your stars are and how many people want to go see you live. And they're down. NXT's house shows are down. at the same period where New Japan's way up, Ring of Honor's way up, but obviously that's all nice, well, and good for this year, but next year's a completely different story for everybody because everything. I mean, there's again, January next year, February next year, there's going to be a lot of changes in this business. But anyway, with Vince says he's going to redo house shows. I don't know what that is. He said he knows how to fix it. I don't think the problem, I said this to Brian the other day, I don't think the problem is the house shows. I think the problem is the product, getting people, the television, getting people excited to go to the house shows, and perhaps the marketing of the house shows, and maybe the years of not telling, the idea of hey, we're coming to town, go buy tickets. It may be the day where you gotta, because I noticed this like with the New Japan shows. One of the things where they were hurting was not giving lineups, and I think it's the same thing with WWE because WWE in most markets it gives lineups, but they're not the lineups that you see. And after a couple times, when your mentality is well, this lineup doesn't matter because they're going to give us whatever they want, no matter what they advertise. You kind of, you don't get excited about matches. And I think that one of the things with the house shows right now is, number one, there's that feeling that it doesn't matter, although it matters the same as it did 15, 20 years ago when they were selling out every building. Or 20 years ago. So it's not, it's not like anything has changed in what they were doing other than, it's not as hot. But I mean, like the whole thing with the whole earnings report, they had the most profitable quarter in their history. And I think that at first you look at that and you go, well, that's great. Everything's turned around. The first two quarters' profit weren't that big. This quarter's profit's really big. But when you look at it closely, I mean, merchandise is down, licensing's down. I think the TV ratings are down, and more than cable in general because they're down. I think it's 9%. As far as live viewing, but 7% if you include DVR viewing, they're down, and cable I think is down 4% maybe, but there's a lot of declines, and also the other reason that they did a $33 million profit is because their actual operating income was $18 million, so it was down from like 21.8 I think the year before, close to 22. But the profit was way bigger because they actually got $15 million from taxes due to, management, just a lot of things that you do to make your tax situation better. So it wasn't that the business profit was higher, even though the overall profit was the highest ever. So I think that people kind of looked at that, and there's I don't want to say warning signs because it's not warning, because the reality is that once those new TV deals come into play, I mean, they're going to be so ridiculously profitable, it's not even funny. So it's nothing to really worry about, but it is something that when you look at it, the popularity, no matter what your TV rights fees are, you want your popularity to grow, and it's clearly going in the other direction. The popularity is getting worse, and I mean, anyone who's followed it knows that's been the case for a while. But I think that this earnings report kind of brought it home more than maybe the other earnings reports, and obviously the stock dropped. Well, a lot of the stock dropped the day after. It wasn't the day of the report came. Well, it did drop a little bit that day, but it dropped big the next day. And the next day big drop was, stemming from the Saudi Arabia thing and the earnings report. It's both. It's not one or the other. A lot of people are trying to argue one or the other. It's both. But the Saudi Arabia thing, you get a bad feeling. I mean, I don't think it's who knows? I mean, who knows what the reaction is? I mean, my history watching bad things that happen in these situations, they always blow over, and the fans say they're going to leave, but they always come back, type of a thing. But again, we're in that position right now. For the public perception of the company, or or just if even non-public, even fan perception. I mean, you look at the company and you kind of go like, you kind of like cringe. It's a decision that when you look at it, you just go like, I mean, yeah, I get why, and I'm not surprised because we already knew like they were not going to make the decision to leave. It was either going to be made for them or they were going, and it wasn't made for them, so they're going. But by going, you're telling the world that all these other people are dropping business there, and you're not. And again, if you needed this business to survive, if you needed this business to be profitable, there's an argument in you're desperate. You need to do what you need to do. When your company is doing great, then people will look at it and just go, "You're just lazy." And when they say that, I mean, how do you argue on this one? I mean, how do you go? Obviously, there's the really interesting thing is on the show is how much propaganda do they do? Because how do you do it? But how do you go? I mean, it's like this thing. How do you go? I mean, it's like, and it's not about, before there were problems and there's, as far as going, but they were, there's a big difference between going and being a propaganda arm, and they're being paid to be a propaganda arm. And what are they going to do? What is the show going to look like? What is that week going to look like? Tweeting stuff from Saudi Arabia, telling, with the wrestler saying how great it is here. I mean, obviously they've run away from the name Saudi Arabia the last 2 weeks. Now, this week, because the show is officially on, do they start talking about Saudi Arabia? And then when they're talking about Saudi Arabia on TV, how does the American fan base and the British fan base look at that and go like, I mean, it's I don't know. It's a very interesting. There's a lot of different things going on, but the and again this week we'll see if the stock price levels off or it continues to drop. I think it's probably going as low as it's going to go. I don't want to say undervalued. I mean, my gut is like 80-ish would be a fair value, so it's under that. But again, there's so many things that go into with the valuation of a company, and one of the things is that even though these television rights fees go up year after year, I mean, the profits really isn't going up that much, or operating income or whatever you call it. And there is, again, at some point, the lessening of popularity is still going to be an issue. And that's not just WWE. That's actually something that every single company, when we look at it, we got to address. When we talk about the other thing, when we talk about the business right now, is, I mean, Raw and SmackDown, yeah, their numbers are down and all that, but everyone else, Impact number this week, scary bad. Total Divas.
How much of that is the time slot?
Everything's the time slot, but the time slot happened, and they'll probably, hopefully come. I mean, like historically with Impact, when they've moved time slots, they go down a lot, and then the audience finds it and all that. So, but they were cut in half. They've never been cut in half. They may lose a little bit, with a move of a time slot, but this is cut in half. I didn't expect that. I don't think anyone expected that. So what happens next? How many people come back? Or is it just that? And, again, I mean, they only had a week to promote it, but still, that drop was a scary drop. Total Divas, way, way down this season. Ultimate Fighter, of course, it may be dead anyway.
Even I'm not watching Ultimate Fighter, and I'm a loyal watcher of that show.
Yeah, well, they were down to, what was it? I think it might have been like 128,000 viewers. I mean, it was like a terrible, terrible number. Lucha Underground not doing well. I mean, so aside from the New Japan on Access, everybody's way down this year. But I guess you could say all TV's down, but again, when you're looking at like the future of everything, it's just so interesting. The different games that are being played. What do we look at like Ring of Honor? What if all those guys leave Ring of Honor? And again, every day it feels closer and closer to the fact that it may happen. Look at Cody's tweet, about I'm not going to be at the Garden show. those guys, none of those guys have. I mean, we know none of those guys are going to sign right now anyway, because they've got to be free agents at least in January to field the other offers. But if Ring of Honor loses those guys, if New Japan loses those guys, I mean, New Japan will survive. With again, Tanahashi, Okada, and Jay, and all those guys, they'll be fine. But even when I was watching like tonight, today we had the Tanahashi and Okada angle, where Jay White was beating down Okada after the match. He threw out some of the Chaos members, Beretta and those guys, and then Tanahashi made the save. Tanahashi and Okada work together to clean house. Then they do the big handshake, tease it. Tanahashi puts out his hand. Okada agrees to it. So Tanahashi and Okada obviously are going to become a tag team.
Mega Powers.
The Mega Powers, exactly what it was. And you even had Lanny Poffo there as an announcer, which was, I'll tell you what, the announcing on today's New Japan show, man, it was real minor league. Not, I mean, I really appreciated Kevin Kelly when I watched a show without him there. He at least and it's nothing against any of those guys other than Lanny, where I will say he shouldn't be there. But I mean, it's an experiment. I hate to jump on somebody after two shows because there's a learning curve and nobody's going to be that good. Don Callis wasn't good week one either, but I really do feel, I don't know, you're going to have to watch it yourself. But
well, he was brought in because they didn't think Don was going to be back, but now that Don is back, what do they need him for?
But Don is only going to be back for certain shows. Don's not back full time. I mean, he's going to be back for the Tokyo Dome, and some of the big shows. I mean, he is too busy to be doing everything, but they are bringing him back, which I do think is a good thing. But and I guess I don't know if they want more announcers so they can do more voiceovers of the old archives. I'm not exactly sure. I probably should ask about that. But I did think like the idea of, to me, Kevin Kelly and Rocky Romero with a translator, whether it's Chris Charlton or somebody else with a translator, they were great in G1. Chris Charlton was great in G1. So, I mean, I thought that was a good team. You don't need to change that team and have maybe Don come in for the big shows. And that's fine and well and good. I don't think that you need these other people. But I don't know what the whole story is behind all of this, but yeah, they're giving different guys tryouts, but it just, there was something about watching what I watched, and again, I didn't even see the whole show, but it was enough to where it just didn't feel right.
I mean, you would think if you bring in a new person, you would give them some practice.
Well, we actually had two new people on the show, too, and, so.
Because that's what they would do on there's a story that in football, the NFL Network team headed by Rich Eisen, Steve Mariucci, Michael Irvin. There's one other guy. They're doing a 4-man booth. I think it may be for the London game. I'm not 100% sure, but they've been practicing.
The London game, those players got arrested.
Yeah. But they've been practicing for like several weeks to get all the kinks out.
Yeah. In WWE, you do that too. You have the guys do practice announcing for a long time before they're ever put on television.
Yeah, so you would think that that instead of the practice being sort of the live event, but
yeah. Well, I mean, you look at it one way, it's like they're practicing on Cork and Hall shows. It's not like they're practicing on. But Lanny Poffo is going to be doing the pay-per-view and be with Kevin Kelly. So we'll see how the show, the Power Struggle show, does on Saturday.
Did he do any poetry?
Not poetry, but it was very Lanny Poffo, which I don't know if that's it. You have to see it. I can't really describe it. You have to see it, but it just doesn't feel right. And I don't think, again, I almost, I don't feel like when I'm watching it, like sometimes I'll go, well, he'll grow into it. And I really wanted to give him the benefit of the doubt. I hate to jump on somebody because I know they're not going to be good when they start, but it really didn't feel right. The whole, I don't know what it was, but it just didn't feel right at all.
So we're like I said, we're kind of going to be jumping around a little bit, but to go back to, you mentioned the word sleazy with the Crown Jewel event, and it reminded me of a time in 1991 when they did this angle based off of the Persian Gulf War. And I feel like reading those old observers, a lot of the same language, a lot of the same feeling was around that too. And you covered both of them. Are there any similarities, dissimilarities in those two stories and the way that you feel that you're handling them and also how other media is handling them? I feel like back then it wasn't taken too seriously, and I feel like there's more stuff out now about
more people are writing about it now, but the value of the media, because there's so much of it and so much of it not respected, it doesn't mean as much now. I mean, just the idea that they were hammered in the National by me in '91 was, you know, it was a giant issue. Now everyone's hammering them, but I mean, it's hard to say because the issues are completely different. I mean, I think this is much worse than that. That was it was exploiting an ongoing war for a wrestling angle, which, you know, was tacky because it was a step that wrestling had never gone in wrestling. You know, even during World War II, they didn't have heel Germans in World War II. They did have heel Germans after World War II. They did have heel Japanese after World War II, but not during the war. And even like Vince himself, you know, like 2 years earlier had gone like, we would never exploit an ongoing war. And then he did. So his, you know, and I mean, the thing that happened there, you know, obviously that WrestleMania didn't sell tickets, and the Saturday Night's Main Event did that record low, and NBC canceled them because of the low rating of the Saturday Night Main Event. So they paid a price. You know, they had the WrestleMania indoors when they were talking about 100,000 people, and they ended up with whatever it was, a little over 14,000 paid for a WrestleMania because they moved indoors. So yeah, they paid a price for that one. This one's that one. I mean, the decision on that one was they were going in a certain decision. You know, I mean, they were going to go with the whole thing. And I remember like the week before, because I talked to JJ Dillon like right before, you know, literally right before we knew that there was going to very likely be a war called, and it's just kind of like, and you're treading on interesting water because you're going here. Because if there's no war, it's wrestling, and it's going to be what it is. If all of a sudden we're in a war and you're doing this Slaughter character, you know, it becomes a very different, you know, entity. And Vince made the call. You know, Vince could have switched gears. He didn't. He made the call. I think historically, you got to look back and go, it was a really bad call based on the economics. And here, I think it's the same thing, but. You know, I mean, it's like here's the thing. It's like for right now, today, it's a really bad call. Okay, and I'd like to say it's a bad call anyway. And morally, you know, you probably would have to say it is a bad call. But you know, this is not a moral business. This is this has always been about money, and you know, you've got 9 more years of that contract, and that's a hell of a lot of money. And I mean, I think that's the whole key to the whole thing is. They figured this one will blow over, but they're in bed with people again. You know, it's you know, and I know that our country's in bed with them in certain ways, but they're in bed with people where stuff can happen all the time. I mean, this is a bad one, and yeah, I don't know. It doesn't. It's weird because it felt. You know, I mean, like before, you had Bob Costas walk out. I mean, you haven't really had that public thing of people just, you know, sponsors. Although no sponsors actually did walk out on that one either. But you know, I mean, it's interesting with Cena and Daniel Bryan. They haven't announced that either of them are off the show. They're continuing to advertise both on the show. As far as anyone knows, Cena's not on the show. And I guess that they're going to do an angle on Raw on Monday and explain that. And the idea is with Daniel Bryan, they may not do an angle, and they may just do the angle the day of the show or something. I mean, I don't know what they're doing, or maybe they're going to they're still in talks with him. I don't, with the Daniel Bryan thing, it's just interesting to me because we really don't know what the situation is other than people are reporting it. And every time I try to get an answer, I'm not getting an answer, as far as like from WWE or creative or talent, everything. I mean, I guess people know that he's not going to be there because that's what they're reporting. But all I know is nobody's confirming to me that he's going to be there. And it's not like I haven't asked a lot of people. So I figure there's smoke to that. I mean, my gut would tell me, but no one's, again, I cannot confirm that. But the story going around is that, again, they'll do some angle to write him off.
And this is, with his recent history, this is not, at least as far as you know, injury related for Daniel Bryan.
Well, no, he worked Tuesday night, and the story came out before Tuesday, so it'd have nothing to do with injuries, So yeah.
So they did actually put the Crown Jewel tickets on sale. So I know they'd held that off.
Right. Because they didn't know they were coming, for sure. Yeah.
And so yeah. So the Bryan and Cena stuff, I guess, was kind of the latest thing that people are looking for news about. Kind of to move in a little bit slightly different direction, because of, I think this is a story that's kind of going to be on top of everyone's minds for a little while, is Roman Reigns. Is there any late stuff on that, or just everything that you've written in the Observer?
Just what I wrote. I mean, there's really not a lot that I haven't written. I'm going to try to find out, I'm going to try to talk to some doctors about leukemia, but I think that the gist of it is how I reported it. It feels, based on what he said, that it's not a deadly form of leukemia, but it's no joke. You know what I mean? It's not like, it's a serious situation. But leukemia can very much be life-threatening, and it doesn't feel like this is a life-threatening thing. It's something, if it's something that he's had in his system, that form of leukemia, at least what I believe from his description of what it is. But the negative of it is that, it can come back and it can flare up at any time, and when he gets older, it's going to be something he's going to battle for the rest of his life. Mm-hmm. So it's a bad deal for him. Again, career-wise, he had it. He came back. I mean, look, there's no problem with his athletic ability, or there has been none, and he had it. So, when he comes back, and I fully believe he's going to come back. When he comes back, hopefully he won't have any fall off of his athletic ability and be able to compete at the same level that he can right now. And, it changes the narrative of his career, obviously. And in many ways, if I look down when he comes back, I mean, he's going to come back as a bigger star and far more popular and very sympathetic character. And I mean, a good thing, it's not a good thing, but a good thing. In bad things, sometimes good things come out like that. And also the fact that I think a lot of people got to see, that the talent's going to back someone in that situation no matter what anyway. But again, talking to, a lot of guys, he was a guy, because of his position, where it'd be very easy for guys to resent him. And I never heard of guys resenting him. Everybody was always like, Roman Reigns is cool. Even he was the handpicked top guy, and I'm sure that there are guys on that roster who will look and just go, I'm better than him. If I had that spot, I could draw better than him. I can talk better than him. But even then, you don't hear anyone publicly resenting him for being in that spot, or not liking him as a person is a better way of putting it. I think everybody likes him. I think he's a good guy. Obviously, from all accounts. It was funny. Tonight, I was out with some friends, and nothing to do with wrestling. Someone was going like about Roman, and they didn't know Roman Reigns the wrestler, but they said, Roman Reigns, I'm a little teapot, short, and the thing. That's where they knew him, which was really interesting from the TV commercial.
I mean, and that's sort of what hit me when I was watching it was that commercial was playing in my mind because I thought,
Mine too.
he's a dad, or
He's a dad.
you know, and anyone with kids
got 3 kids.
can relate. And then
Right.
I read that he also has twin boys.
Right.
So yeah, that's, I mean, you know, you automatically put yourself in that situation, someone having kids like you and I, and yeah, that's where I was just like, oh man, this
You know,
is
and 33 years old.
Yeah.
You know, so, you know, yeah, everybody, you know, like in our situation, we're going to root for this guy to make it because he's got 3 kids. And the other thing is like I wrote, I mean, you know, having been in, I never had leukemia, but, you know, whatever. I've been through bad situations too. Not like that, but, you know, when you go through that, when you go through that like that life or death thing, it's you know, again, the motivation that keeps you going. If he's got 3 kids, they're going to have to kill him to kill him. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. I mean, he ain't going to give up. I mean,
it's not hard to find inspiration for him.
No.
The other thing, when you were writing that story that I thought was pretty interesting, you were talking about who the next person could be. The next top guy.
Yeah, it's a really, if he cannot come back at that level, if he cannot come back, because there's no guarantees. I think he will, based on what the disease that I think he has. I think it'll be the same. I'm hoping it. You know, again, the second time is usually worse than the first. But again, you know, he came back from the first one, and you know, it was able to perform at this level. You know, at a very strong level. I mean, it's not like he was slow or out of shape or not athletic. He was all of that. So hopefully he can come back and all that. But if they do need to get another guy in that spot, I mean, it's they don't got, again, but some of that's, a lot of that's Vince though, because Vince is very narrow on what can be a top guy.
Reading what you wrote, what I got out of it is that there's no real simple choice.
No, not at all. There's no groomed guy that's going to replace Roman Reigns like there was from, I don't want to say day one, but pretty early on. I mean, when Roman Reigns was in developmental, they had already decided that he was going to do replacement of John Cena. And this is when he was completely unproven. They had already decided that.
Yeah, and like you said, you know, hopefully he does come back. But it does feel a little bit like 92-ish with Bret Hart and Shawn Michaels and those guys. You know, Hogan leaves and they're kind of, they don't really have a chosen guy either.
Yeah.
But I mean, obviously Bret Hart and Shawn Michaels are great. That's not saying that there is.
Shawn, you know, at one point Shawn was the chosen guy. Bret never really was. Bret was always the stopgap. You know, and the first time he was there to hold the fort until Hogan came back. And then, you know, they, again, at one point they tried to go back to Warrior around whatever it was, that 95, 96. But, you know, I don't think Vince was ever fully committed to Warrior because he knew of the past and Warrior could walk out on him. So he was, you know, again, but he really went with Shawn. He definitely went with Kevin Nash. But, you know, nothing really clicked at the real level until Austin. And then Austin clicked gigantic.
Yeah. The person I would go with would be Seth, and I'd have Drew be sort of the top of the mountain for him. But
it could be Drew.
I think Drew's great. The only thing is, you think about that, if you play out that storyline, let's say at a WrestleMania, Seth wins Royal Rumble or something, that's not like a huge match, you know, like for like thinking about it.
Oh, if you think it's Seth and Drew at WrestleMania because we watched them on TV week in and week out on Raw, and it's just a match on Raw, yeah, it's not. No, it's not that special WrestleMania match.
Yeah, and that's kind of tough to think about. But what is at this point?
Well, you know, Ronda and Charlotte, Batista and Triple H.
Yeah, outside of, you know, guys coming back, you know, like maybe Rock or Brock or whatever.
Maybe Undertaker and Shawn again. Although that, you know, well, the Saudi show will determine if that's good or bad based on Shawn. But, you know, that after that Triple H Undertaker match, you know, it really killed me for Undertaker. It was like, because that was the first one when that match was over. I kept thinking Undertaker's going to look back at this tape and go, "Why did I ever come back this time?" But he's probably making so much money on this run that he's probably in his mind again thinking, this is my retirement. You know what I mean? This is my pension for the rest of my life. I got to make money right now, so that's why he's doing it. But that was the one time. I mean, he really did look out of shape and did not look good at all in that match.
I think everyone is thinking, okay, Brock is probably going to be done after this show and then go to the UFC.
But Brock will be back,
and come back. But with this thing, with Roman being out, could you see Vince trying to keep him around?
Brock, absolutely,
and compete against the UFC, whatever their offer is going to be.
Absolutely, it wouldn't surprise me at all. I wouldn't be shocked if Brock wins. I don't expect it to win. I expect Strowman to win, but I'm not surprised at anything with. I know how Brock thinks, and I know how Vince thinks, and Brock is just looking for the best money offer. And when push comes to shove, Vince always wants to keep him. So, if Vince is going to pay him the amount that it's going to take to pay him, there's a real good chance he's going to put the title back on him at that point. But it could be, again, it could be maybe they can't match the kind of money, because UFC now for a real marquee guy, for a real numbers moving guy like Conor or Brock or John Jones, I mean, they're paying those guys more than ever because so many of the guys can't move numbers. So they're more valuable. The big draws are more valuable to UFC now than at any time in history. So they're able to command more money.
Later actually it's later today now, is the Evolution show. What are you feeling about it? We're half a day away or whatever it is. I
think they've done a good job the last 48 hours or so of trying to promote the significance. I think the fans will probably be into it.
I really worry about the two matches that I'm most interested in are the Kairi Sane and Shayna and Toni Storm and Io Shirai. Like those are the matches that
me too.
And I worry about them a little bit with with the more WWE crowd, because who knows of that audience how many people will have seen all that stuff play out. Yeah,
it's a real concern. Because it's like the matches, the Charlotte and Becky Lynch match will do very well, and the Ronda match I expect it to do real well because I know they've been practicing and everything. So those matches will be fine. But the two that you talked about have the chance to steal the show if the crowds allows them to steal a show, especially the Toni Storm and Io Shirai. I mean, that should be close to the best women's match of the year. I think that the Toni Storm match with Meiko Satomura may have been the best women's match I've seen in WWE all year.
Yeah, that match was really good.
Because it was that one, or was it Satomura and Mercedes Martinez? I think those were better than any of the main roster matches, and even there hasn't been a killer women's takeover match. So I think those are probably the two best I've seen this year.
And it's official. Alexa Bliss out of the match.
Yeah.
So Alicia Fox replaces her, which, I don't know.
Charlotte and Asuka at WrestleMania would be up there too.
Yes, that was a really good match.
Yeah.
But I thought Alexa and Trish could have some fun stuff in the match. It's a little bit of a bummer that they're not that Alexa's out of the match. Yeah. But
see, by the way, I'm sure you didn't, but I got the gambling odds for the stars and everything. So they're the Toni Storm match, they're predicting you can bet over under is 3 3/4. The Charlotte and Becky is 4. Ronda and Nikki Bella was, I don't remember what it is. I don't have it in front of me, but it was like 2.5, 2 1/4. It was way low based on what I thought it would be. And then Shayna was 3.5. Shayna and Kairi Sane. And then the tag match is 1 3/4, which is, so they're not expecting much out of that.
Yeah, Mickey and Trish could do some fun stuff. So yeah, if you give me the times that they're giving these women, I think I could probably do a pretty good job with the over-unders.
Let's start with Becky Lynch. The last I heard, of course, this stuff changes every minute. Last I heard, they were going to get a lot of time. So as far as the other ones, I don't know, but I know I heard they're going to get a lot of time.
Do you sense that there's going to be news or sort of big angles coming out of this show?
I'm sure there will be. I wouldn't be surprised if they announce like women's tag. But here's the thing: women's tag team titles, obviously, they should have them because you want the women to have everything the men have. You want it to be equal, so they should. But God, do we really want like women's tag three new belts? Because if you get women's tag team, you got to do it in Raw and SmackDown for sure. Probably NXT. That's three more belts right there. You know, when we're already overloaded and have way too many, I don't know. If it was one women's tag thing, I think that would be absolutely great. Two is, but I mean, we can't have less than two, I think. You can't have it on Raw and not on SmackDown. I mean, I guess you could, but I think that just would diminish SmackDown at a time when SmackDown really doesn't need to be diminished.
A little bit of a change of topic here, but I would love to be a fly on some of these walls at the Jericho Cruise.
Yeah,
weekend.
No kidding. There's a lot of interesting characters there, all at the same time. I mean, between, Don Callis, who runs Impact, you got the group of guys that are all going to be free agents. Every one of them's there. Chris Jericho is there, who is a free agent.
Vince has got to call Jericho to come in, don't you think?
Well, yeah, but who knows? I mean, the thing with, I don't know. I mean, Jericho's got a lot of touring next year. I don't know what happens with Jericho. I mean, I think it depends on the lay of the land. There's a lot of things that could happen or not happen. And, Jericho will turn out fine either way. He doesn't have to go anywhere, I mean, and he could sit out. He could sit out too. Although I don't see him sitting out a year at this stage of his career because I think he knows that his time is, I don't want to say running short, but, he doesn't have that many years left where he can be a really top guy. I mean, the way he does his schedule and reinvents himself, he'll probably have more than most. But still, when you're at the age he's at, you kind of like, it's not like when you're 35 and I'll take 3 years off. I don't see him taking, he's going to work somewhere. Where that will it be New Japan for a couple of matches?
Well, he's at least probably got two with them. He's got the match.
He's got Evil and he's got Naito. But after January 4th, who knows? Will he do more next year? Will he do more next year as far as New Japan goes? I think depends on the offer New Japan makes. I think if New Japan will make the same offer or but a substantial offer to him, I could see him wanting to stay and wrestle Tanahashi and Okada. Because a lot of it is for him because he is, I don't want to say he's financially secure enough and he's made enough money that what he does, everything he does for fun. So if they don't insult him in his mind with an offer, I could see him wanting, to go in there. I mean, I know he wants to wrestle Tanahashi and Okada. So, he may want to do that, or he may feel that, if he loses to Naito here, that it's been long enough. He's been gone from WWE, from television. And part of this, I think, is to keep himself relevant while waiting to go back. I mean, I think that was the original plan. That was the original plan. Now, today, obviously he's had a change of heart because before it was just like, oh, I'll wrestle in Japan, I won't wrestle in the United States. And now he's made it very clear he'll wrestle in the United States again with somebody other than the WWE. So, I mean, is something going to happen? I mean, obviously there's smoke. But until, I mean, no matter what, no matter who, I don't care who it is, the key lesson is WWE did not make money promoting house shows. So if they don't on a national basis, who can? I mean, PWG can, but that's a couple shows a year. It's that's not the business. The business is creating content and getting paid big money. So, and there are people out there who will pay big money, but nobody has offered that to anyone in pro wrestling other than WWE. Will that change? I mean, I look at MMA, we look at boxing too, where all these different people have gotten real big money offers. So it can happen, but it hasn't happened yet. So I think that's that's really one of the key stories. Maybe maybe the biggest story of next year is somebody going to get that? And the other thing I think is interesting, because nobody has signed with the Ring of Honor, which tells me because I think that if Ring of Honor had made a real big offer to these guys, they would stay. Because I think schedule-wise, you understand all those guys. Schedule-wise, the Ring of Honor New Japan schedule, I don't think that they got a problem with that. I think that there's just a feeling that we want to take a step higher. And Sinclair, does Sinclair want to take that step and, whatever it is, value the content more and all that? And the sign that they would be to keep these guys. And, they made offers to these guys, but, obviously they haven't taken those offers. So the offers couldn't be at that level that you would need to compete in the market. And that's a statement right there of Sinclair is not looking at it this way. Sinclair's not looking at it like Paramount did with Bellator, which is a perfect example of the number 2 company who, or one right now, which is spending, giant money for Eddie Alvarez and I'm sure giant money for Demetrious Johnson because they got $166 million in funding. And I know that people can promote a wrestling show, a wrestling company that's going to gross a lot more money than one does. I've seen, you saw the one stuff in the Observer just last week on how much money they're really taking in, and a lot of that's barter money, which is kind of like fake money. But they just got all that funding even with no revenues. So, I mean, it's like if somebody wanted to do that in wrestling, I think it would be a better bet than Bellator. I think it'd be a better bet than PFL. For sure PFL, because PFL's, whatever. PFL doesn't make any economic sense at all. And maybe, Bellator, maybe yes, maybe no. But the point is that you see all that already in what I would call the sister business, which is MMA. Because as far as businesses goes, they're the same business, essentially, just one's real and one's not. And there's a lot of people putting a lot of money in MMA right now. So it only takes one person to put that kind of an effort into wrestling, and Sinclair evidently isn't that person. And how aggressive New Japan is, well, I mean, we'll see January 1st how aggressive New Japan is when they start, negotiating their deals for next year.
So back to the Jericho Cruise. Have you heard how it looks? Just the photos I've seen, it looks like it's a blast. But have you heard anything else about people enjoying it, or just any other news coming out of it?
It's the first day. I mean, the only thing I've seen pictures, and it looks like everyone's having a great time. And I heard LAX and the Young Bucks had a great match, and I didn't really hear a lot else.
I heard Remembering Eddie Guerrero podcast, I think.
That Jericho did with a couple of people. Yeah, Conan and who else?
I think it was
Rey Mysterio.
Rey and DDP, I think.
Yeah, DDP. Yeah.
And so that goes through the whole weekend, right?
Yeah.
Probably be some more stuff coming out of there. Okay, so you had mentioned Will Ospreay. Is there any updates on his injuries?
He's not healing as fast as he hoped, which is never a good sign. I mean, it's too bad because it's not the injuries. I think it's an intercostal injury, but I don't know that for sure. It might be a rib injury, You know, it's a body injury. It's not the neck or something that people were expecting. It's not the shoulders. So, you know, hopefully he gets better. Because, you know, he was really like I don't want to say he was the best wrestler in the world this year, but he had more great matches per capita than anybody. I mean, because every time like Will Ospreay did a singles match, whether it was in Australia, whether it was in the UK, whether it was in Japan, all I would hear is, "Oh my God, you got to see it." And when I would watch it, it would be like, "Oh, geez," you know, he was putting out like crazy. I mean, to the point it was kind of scary at times. You know, he's still, you know, they were grooming Will Ospreay and Kota Ibushi, and you know, I don't know for the Tokyo Dome, but all the tea leaves read that way. So hopefully they can. He's ready by then, and they can do that because that would cap off the Tokyo Dome and make it even bigger.
There was something you had mentioned earlier about Cody's tweet about not working the MSG show. I find it interesting because I think you had it in the Observer saying that he wants to work New Japan forever or something.
Yeah,
like that.
That's what he said. He wants to work New Japan for the rest of his career.
And New Japan is associated with this show, so that comment kind of is a little bit of a disconnect to me.
Yeah, me too. You know, again, right now we know a lot of this is posturing, negotiating. I'm not sure how saying that is beneficial in your negotiations, though. Does that give you more? Is it give you more leverage with Ring of Honor by saying that? Does it give you less leverage to WWE? Is that is all that a moot point anyway? I don't know.
Yeah, it came off, just as I thought about it, definitely came off as like a slap to ROH.
Yeah, well, it's going to be really interesting too because it's. I'm wondering how, like at Final Battle, especially because it's New York. We know about the New York crowd. How are they going to react to these guys? You know, because I don't know the answer. I don't know the answer to that.
Also, you've been talking about the Wrestle Kingdom tickets and sort of the prices and how hard it's been to get them. Are you going this year?
I'm going. Yeah, you know that.
Well, I know that, but
so yeah, of course, you know.
Yeah, so that's So I guess the thing that I'm interested in was like, how hard was it to get the tickets? Like,
I haven't got tickets.
Oh, you're relying on someone to find some tickets, I'm assuming.
Well, it's 46,000 seats. So I'm figuring that even if it sells out, it's not going to sell out instantly. But it's the thing is like most of the people who I know would get tickets from scalpers. So they didn't really worry about it. They were just going to pay whatever the scalpers wanted, and that's not a problem. And scalping is illegal now in Japan, so it's more difficult to do this than it would have been in other years or every other year. So yeah, tickets are interesting for a lot of stuff, and even like Ryzen, you know, because I actually was, you know, as far as the Ryzen goes, you know, they totally sold out their last show. Before Ryzen, you could always get Ryzen tickets. So you know, and again, New Year's Eve is their biggest show of the year, and the last show, which you know was Horiguchi and was it Nakazawa, which was a hell of a fight, by the way. That was, you know, they legitimately sold out Saitama, you know, which was the biggest crowd and the biggest, you know, the biggest show they've ever done.
So, I guess kind of getting away from the wrestling stuff for a second, Kevin Kay out of Paramount.
That could be huge. That could be huge. Yeah, because the guy who runs, I mean, Kevin Kay was running Paramount, he was running CMT, and he was running Bellator. So they have a new person in charge, and I don't know what he's going to think of Bellator. So, you know, it's if I'm Bellator, I think it's a pretty serious issue, especially because Bellator ratings were down this year. Kevin K was a big, one of his claims to fame is that he greenlit The Ultimate Fighter and he put UFC on television, and UFC became this giant sports property. And without him, none of this happens. Without Kevin K, without Vince McMahon, without Lorenzo Fertitta's money, Dana White, Joe Silva, none of this happens. I mean, that's the crazy thing about the history of MMA and in this country is it could easily have been dead, but it ended up flourishing. And Kevin K was an integral part of that. He was also, when he lost UFC, the first thing they did was, basically buy Bellator, which, again, the interesting thing about the buying of the Bellator, because I talked to, Kevin K when they did all this, and Dave Schwartz, who's with Bellator now still. I mean, the whole thing was that they saw these sports property rights skyrocketing. They were paying $33 million a year for UFC, and then Fox jumps in and pays $100 million, and they could not afford to match it, or they didn't want to match it, whatever it was. They didn't want to match the $100 million, and it's kind of like, if we take this property and we build it up really big, then these networks are going to buy it, or somebody else is going to buy it, and all we did was build a property up big for somebody else. So their idea is that instead of having to spend $50 million, $100 million, $150 million a year on these TV rights, what we'll do is we'll just buy the thing. So we own the TV rights, and we don't have to get into bidding wars over them if they get popular. So they bought Bellator, but Bellator, it's had a bad year ratings-wise. I mean, the ratings have dropped a lot, even though show-wise and talent-wise, I find Bellator interesting and fresh, but a lot of the B shows are very skippable, obviously. Do they go in there and do they look to sell it to somebody else at this point? Do they look at it and not look at it in those terms of, hey, we've got a sports franchise and we don't even have to pay rights fees for it because we own it? Do they look at it that way? Because if they sell it, then they have to pay rights fees to keep the television rights, or the guys may be able to negotiate, because all the sports networks will want Bellator, that are out there. And I can even see Fox wanting Bellator when UFC moves to FS1. I mean to ESPN, I'm sorry. So it's like, maybe it's best for them to keep it, but man, the ratings aren't that strong. Kevin K is also a big kickboxing fan. That's why there's the kickboxing there, even though kickboxing never really hit big in the United States. Kevin K was the guy who greenlit Impact. I mean, TNA would have died in 2005 if it wasn't for Kevin K greenlighting it. And, and if Kevin K didn't make the call to cancel it, they'd probably be worth, they'd probably be doing a whole lot better than they are now. But those mistakes that Impact made that lost them Spike, those were unforgivable mistakes because they killed the company. And these guys that are running the company now are having to, like it's, they're living with the mistakes of the previous regime.
What do you know about the guy taking his place?
Nothing. I don't know what he's like as far as sports or anything like that. I have not heard word one. He's going to take over a bunch of networks. Bellator is not his primary concern, but it is under his watch, mm-hmm. Under his purview. So, what he's going to think of Bellator, what he's going to think of professional wrestling, again. But the Paramount Network, unlike Spike, which was really this guy's network and everything, Paramount Network isn't looking to be like sports and cool stuff for guys that would want a pro wrestling program, traditional pro wrestling program. But that doesn't mean that, they may go in there. I know that Kevin K, he took meetings with other people about bringing pro wrestling in after they dumped TNA. at one point, I know that they were very, I know they were interested at one point in doing it, but then the last time I talked to them, whatever it was, I'm going to think 6-9 months ago, maybe longer, about, wrestling, they just, for whatever reason, they didn't have an interest in wrestling at that point.
What, is there anything else to this Demetrious Johnson and Askren trade?
It's interesting.
Other than Askren telling Dana to unblock him on Twitter.
Well, I it's weird to me because UFC losing Demetrious Johnson is a sign. Because it's like UFC has the best guys in every weight class, at least the best guy. Like the best guys in Bellator are right now, Aaron Pico could be something, obviously. But he's not. He's unproven at that level. He hasn't even won the Bellator championship yet. And AJ McKee and all that. But there's some young guys there that have a lot of promise. But I mean, as far as like the guys who are the best proven commodities, there would be Rory McDonald and Ryan Bader. And Ryan Bader was never going to win the UFC light heavyweight championship. I don't believe. I mean, he'll probably get upset at me saying that, but I don't believe he would ever been able to, especially with John Jones back. As far as McDonald, he did beat Tyron Woodley. I think he has a shot, but he had lost a couple of fights in UFC before he left. But Demetrious was, you think flyweight champion Demetrious Johnson, they're like synonymous. It's like you don't even, it's almost hard to believe that Henry Cejudo beat him, and that Demetrious isn't the champion right now. And most people, I think, okay, he lost a close fight where he got taken down with 30 seconds left, or else the fight could have gone either way. It was a pick'em fight essentially. So if there's a rematch, I would say I would almost give Demetrious a slight favorite shot at winning the rematch, but there is no rematch. And the rematch was going to be the biggest flyweight fight they've in history because it's Demetrious going for the title, and it's not going to happen. Demetrious obviously got a great money offer from one, but who does he fight there? All the top, So it's kind of weird. It's like for him for money, I'm sure that it was a great deal, or he wouldn't want to go. Because the thing with this trade thing is that everybody won because Ben Askren wanted to go to UFC. He was done with one. Demetrious wants the money from one, so he got that. And I guess you could say maybe if you argue that UFC losing Demetrious was, it's not a financial blow because Demetrious never drew, but I still thought that, like, from a sports standpoint, there was unfinished business with Demetrious at a high level, at the championship level going. So from a perspective of UFC being the place where the best in the world go for championships, it was a blow. As far as like a personality, Askren's going to work much, much harder marketing his fights than Demetrious ever did, and that's a big part of UFC. As far as excitement in fights, it is what it is. As much as Ben Askren is undefeated, he's never beaten. He beat Koreshkov. We just saw Lima beat Koreshkov. He's never beaten a top guy. He is pretty one-dimensional in the sense that he's an incredible wrestler, but his striking, he's got good enough strike defense that he rarely gets hit, which is a talent, but I don't feel, that he's gonna, I don't feel he's gonna beat the top guys. Maybe, it's like he is better wrestler than Colby Covington. There are fights, Colby Covington's one that comes to mind. GSP. And you know what? Maybe if that gets GSP out of retirement, then that's a good thing too.
I think the one thing that was interesting in when Eddie Alvarez was talking about the deal, he talked a lot about partnership, this and that, but he also said the deal's not as long as you may think it is, meaning to me that the money may be a lot of money for a shorter term, and he could always come back to the UFC. Maybe that's a play with DJ too, is that, he spends a year and a half or 2 years and fights over there, and then he comes back, and it's maybe he's a little bit, if they keep the division, he's kind of fresh again.
Yeah, we don't know if they're going to keep the division, which is an important point. Yeah, I mean, if he gets giant money for 2 years and then can still come back, good for him. Again, good for him on the money. Obviously, he's getting it. I don't know how he generates it, for one. I mean, it's like, will his fights, because he's on a one show, will that garner more interest? Yes, but will it really garner interest? You know what I mean? Aoki was fighting for one, and nobody here cared. Of course, Demetrious is a much better fighter than Aoki is overall. All around, he might be the best fighter there is in the sport right now. But does that, one's spending a lot, but Demetrious never drove revenue in UFC. The whole thing with Demetrious is that his big thing is that he's a great fighter. And so people who want to follow this as a sport and want to gravitate towards a great fighter, there he is. For one, I don't know. It's between where they are, and he's going to fight unknown guys. So if he keeps winning against unknown guys, he's going to fade from people's memory. But yeah, if he comes back in 2 years, he'll probably be a bigger star actually taking that route.
We got one more thing, but did we miss anything in the things that you want to talk about? Okay, so we did a podcast together which focused a lot on the Ted Turner story that you wrote. You have updated some new information in the last couple issues of The Observer. You were also on Jim Cornette's podcast with Brian Last, and there's some new information. We talked about sort of the Ann Gunkel side of the story, and now there's a fuller side of the story, and if you wanted to update kind of from the last podcast. Yeah,
I mean, so the Welch family and Brian Last really went through this pretty well. So their feeling was, and this is probably true, knowing kind of the background of what was going on in Georgia at the time, that Ray Gunkel was probably, he was running the company anyway, but maybe Ray Gunkel was looking to take over. But if he was looking to take over, I think that he would want to stay with the NWA as opposed to go independent. So just basically take over the office. Okay, Ray dies. They try to buy Ann out. She doesn't want to go out. She's making moves to promote while Tom Ernesto's telling the NWA guys, Buddy Fuller and some of the other people, that she's really not going to open. Then she opens and takes everyone. I mean, the one thing about that period that's so interesting, because the NWA really was very powerful, and outlaw wrestling was really looked on badly. And those guys, it's like you had a company. It's like when all the Noah guys left, All Japan. The fact is that they weren't going to be blacklisted out of the business, and they were, if they were good, there was going to be a place for them. And the same thing with them. But the point is that if you worked outlaw against the NWA, there's this mentality that, in the end, the NWA is going to win. And when they do, all you guys who walked out are, you're going to have a hard time getting work. So it's like you're sort of risking your career. And Ed Capral, who was the legendary announcer there, he, in fact, that did end his career because he went with the Gunkel side, and the NWA brought in, they had a couple people, but eventually Gordon Soley. And when the war was over, it was Gordon Soley who kept the spot. and Ed Capral was done with wrestling, and he was like I said, a legendary announcer. Most of the talent, if they were good, they continued to get, they were going to be able to get work because it's, but by doing it, you would be threatened and be told that you wouldn't, even though in reality, if you're marketable, there were so many places that needed people who were marketable that you're going to get something. So, the feeling was that, that the story of them closing the company and reopening under a new name, that actually came after, or at least technically after Ann Gunkel started. It didn't come before. So that was a key aspect of the story. Buddy Fuller was also, Ann Gunkel and Ray Gunkel were friends, especially Ann, with Ted Turner. That's how wrestling got on TBS, WTCG at the time. In the first place in 71, I guess. And then Christmas 71, I think. But then when the split came, Ann Gunkel got the TV from the NWA, but the NWA got their TV because Buddy Fuller was also friends with Ted Turner. So he was able to get the NWA back on TV. So they both had TV. Not only they both had TV, but they had TV on the exact same station while they're in this bitter war.
Okay, so you and Brian coming back post Evolution?
Yeah, of course. Actually, we should talk the standings. So the New Japan. So today they have actually right now they got each team's got one match left. So the teams with it's with the teams that are 4-2 are Sho and Yo, Desperado and Yoshinobu Kanemaru, and Shingo Takagi and Bushi. And then at 3-3, which means still alive, would be Taguchi and ACH, Taiji, Ishimori and Robbie Eagles, and Chris Sabin and Kushida. So there's 6 teams, I guess, that are probably alive in some mathematical form right now. I think the 2 and 4 which is Tiger Mask and Liger. I think they're pretty much shot because even if they win their last match, they're only going to end up 3 and 4. So that ain't going to fly. 4 and 3 can win if you have a 6-way tie, but obviously the 3 teams that are 4 and 2 have certainly the chance of being number 1. Now the top 2 teams are the ones that go to the finals. So you got 6 teams battling for those 2 spots. November 1st will be the final, which would be Sabin and Kushida against Sho and Yo, I believe. So I think that match will probably, just the way that they do their booking, that match will probably determine one of the spots. Actually, it's not. I actually think I had that wrong. Sho and Yo against. I can't even read my writing. So the final round robin day is Thursday, which would the 1st, and the match is Sabin and Kushida. Okay, so it is Sabin and Kushida against Sho and Yo. So one of those 2 teams is probably going to the finals. And, of those other 4 teams that I mentioned, I think the other finalists will come from that group, which would be, like I said, depending on a lot of things, Desperado, Kanemaru, which I could see them going and losing in the finals because they're champs. So it's usual, ghetto booking very, very often in the finals of a tournament will have the champs lose because then the winners will then face, because this will determine a Tokyo Dome match too. The winners of the tournament are going to face Desperado and Kanemaru at the Tokyo Dome unless they do a multiple person match. So I could see Desperado and Kanemaru against the winner of Sabin Kushida versus Sho and Yo. And going even further, I would say that it probably won't be Sabin Kushida because I expect the Tokyo Dome to be Kushida against somebody for the junior title. So I guess that makes Sho and Yo the favorites. And then rightfully so because of all these teams, they're the ones New Japan's pushing the hardest. Yeah.
All right. So that's it from here. Thanks for listening.